$100 million. Every million of the 100 million still counts. And so we need to be prudent when it comes to taxes. And we need to be prudent when it comes to how we structure our state. So, as an example, with the DST 2.0, the really nice thing about this piece is that we are effectively, when we utilize more, possibly double it before he passes away, and he's doing all of that outside of there's still a need for life insurance. There's still a need for charitable giving. There's still any of those other tools now needed in excess. We don't have to get overly exorbitant with life insurance. We don't have to give away more of our estate to charity than we really desire because of our charitable inclination. We now can actually do what we wish at a much higher degree or higher level because the sales trust, which becomes a little bit of the keystone in the archway arch. There's a keystone in the middle, and this deferred sales trust oftentimes is the keystone tool, keystone financial tool, allows everyone to have a more full place and not to be used exorbitantly. I don't know if that helps answer your question, Jack.
It does, Jake. It's really well said, and I think it's great to hear. You know, sometimes we're saying the same thing, but we're saying it in a little different nuance, right? To connect everyone to listen to this. And so, by the way, I'm coming back to ask this is individual estate planning. Estate planning allows the wealth owner to dictate how their wealth will be distributed after their passing. It can be tailored to meet the individual needs or interests of each heir. This is particularly useful when children have different visions for their inherited wealth. And as the deferred sales trust pertains to this, the nice part about the deferred sales trust is if you have multiple kids, you can sell the asset today, move it outside the taxable estate. The children can be the heirs of this trust, and they can receive it, or they can continue to defer the tax if they'd like to, right? Although we are moving it outside the taxable estate, so we will eliminate that estate tax, which is so key. On DST 1.0, they can just step into the shoes and you can continue to deferral. But this one child might want to just cash out completely, pay the tax. The other wants to continue estate planning as it pertains to the parents or concerns their children, because the decision's already made for them and the funds are diversified, invested, right? And it's not necessarily tied to a single asset in one location or one business. I think it's really key to structure that allows for flexibility and the payment for each individual can be different for the parents, for the children, and it can also be the parents might say, you know what, necessarily want $100 million to pass all to my children all right away. I like via my living trust to dictate how this will pass, right? So all these little nuances create customized solutions for clients. And like Jake said too, you might have a donor advised fund. You might have a amount that still goes to charity, but it's not forcing or over forcing what percentages you might be giving. You might want to give 20%, 30%, 10%. Everyone's different, right? So that's the beauty of the deferred sales trust, is it didn't limit you from going to charity, but it does give you the ability to be flexible with charitable giving or not, while stating a lot of what RT provides. We're like to CRT with what we said there, or pull out any nuggets that you want to exemplify a little bit.
Really, the only thing I'm going to add is that I don't think a lot of children and even the owners of the assets realize what kind of tax situation they're in. And specifically, Brett, you and I have been talking about a deal, and the only thing they're focused on is capital gains deferral, but they don't realize that it's such a large deal. They're going to also be dealing with a significantly sized tax burden that falls under the federal estate tax. And, that's the reason why you really want to deal with professionals like Jake Miller, Brett Swartz, myself, Rebecca. We all work as a team to work with the individual seller's financial planner, real estate broker, attorney, CPA, tax professionals, because these conversations need to be brought up. Questions need to be asked, strategies need to be built, so that we're not solving an area over here, solving a problem here and creating a problem over there simultaneously. And that's where the beauty of these larger transactions can come in, is we can use it, like Jake Miller said, as a keystone in the planning process to shift and move and customize the estate plan for each individual.
Yeah, it's perfect. And by the way, I'll let ChatGPT do a little bit more for us too. It says management of inherited wealth. The DST also provides a way to manage the inherited wealth. The DST is managed by a trustee. That's our company, which can be beneficial if there are concerns about a child's ability to manage large sums of money. There's if you guys have heard of the crisis of the third generation of wealth. First generation, typically earns or builds massive amount of wealth. Second generation inherits it. By the third generation, 70% of it's lost. And it's a huge crisis for this wealth transfer. And so as a part of this, having trusted advisors, having trusted trustees, having trusted, team in place can be very beneficial for especially large sums of money for children who may or may not be as responsible or of age or whatever it might be. This ensures that the wealth is professionally managed and used in a way that aligns with the beneficiary's best interest and or the parent's best interest, right? Also, number 5, conflict of resolution through detailed estate planning. The use of the DST's potential disputes among heirs over the division of wealth can be minimized. And that has to do with where we have a client sold a 20-unit apartment complex in Folsom for him. He has a house that he inherited years that overlooks the ocean, beautiful, and there's 4 kids, and each of them have their own desires, right? And he's in the middle of it. He just wants to be retired and done with it because he's owned it for 30 plus years. So he feels pressured by this estate plan. The owner can ensure each child's inheritance is customized to each of the individual needs and desires of the children. But because he sells it now, he basically creates a position now from the children who might be being close. And so this is key. But all of this, you want to make sure you're working with estate planning attorneys, financial advisors, right, tax professionals, the DST tax attorneys that are business partners we work with, as well as your estate attorney, CPA, because it's not just a one size fits all. Each individual circumstance varies, and you want to make sure that you have a team of professionals to help you execute on this estate planning team. Being said, on open questions or thoughts, we'll start with Rebecca. All of that. Any thoughts or questions or comments on any of that?
So I was just thinking of speaking to a friend who's dealing with some trust issues, grandfather down to her, down to children, and that kind of thing. And so they own a business, and if you sell that business in order to trigger the ST in this case, to make it work for the peace in resolution in the inheritance, right? I guess.
Yep.
I'm thinking, yeah. So
Yeah.
if the kids are working in the business, then it may not make sense to sell the business.
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly. There's all these little nuances, right? We have one deal we're working on where they want to bring in one of the children to do another deal with them. And so they say, well, can we join LLC with the child as the managing member of the LLC in partnership with, mom or dad on this next business venture or real estate investment? And the answer is yes, right? Okay. So there's ways to create opportunities for wealth building, and that is very tax efficient, and helps to, because I think a lot of our clients, they're retiring as maybe they're baby boomers, right? But at the same time, they want to be in the game, but they may not want to be in the game 100%. And they actually want to teach and train and groom their children to build wealth. And so as a part of doing that funding venture partners, children, business. Any thoughts on that, Rebecca? Or?
Yeah, no, I think that definitely hits the points and the ways to make work for different situations. Another question: can you, let's say, have a nonprofit up and sell a business to that nonprofit, even though the DST will be the note holder of your profits? Can you do that?
So it all depends, right? So on the non-profit, or are you? What's the main purpose? What would you say that the client wants to achieve there?
Providing a social service that so more of like a charity type thing. So a nonprofit existence, but that move, I guess, transferring the actual real estate and be the profit, be the owner of the real estate.
Yeah, so I think one or the other.
Okay.
So you might figure out a transfer that really to a nonprofit to the close of escrow on it, so that it just goes directly to the nonprofit. In that sense, you don't necessarily need the DST. Okay. And or you would just sell into the DST, and then the DST that was accruing or earning could roll into something like a donor advised fund, or perhaps your own fund your nonprofit, and perhaps there's some tax efficiencies there, right? Okay. So I think what I'm trying to achieve, I want to be able to give, and right, well, honoring and paying you out a payment, you could pull that into the donor advised fund, or at the close, maybe you do a little bit of both, right? Maybe do 50% advised fund. Maybe the nonprofit RTs, DSTs. Jake Miller, any thoughts on that nonprofit question from Rebecca?
So Rebecca, there's a lot of empathy here, because a lot of people, in lack of better terms, do their own nonprofit. There's a lot of legalities around you donating money to your nonprofit, and you being a director, you being in control, and things of that nature. Because then they're going to really scrutinize whether or not it's a true charitable cause and this, that, and the other. However, we have actually helped several people form foundations and nonprofits for purposes similar to this, that actually do accomplish, based on the director of the nonprofit or foundation, their goals and are effective deductions. And so I guess going back to what we talked about earlier on, depending on the amount of money in the deferred sales trust, you may be charitably inclined to give, let's say, 10%. All right. Some people might be motivating you to give 50% because that's how the strategy has to work in like a CRAT or a CRUT or an endowment plan with university. If, for example, I have two clients that are from Pakistan and they want to set up a U.S. nonprofit so that they can donate and get a deduction to money that they want to send to hospitals in Pakistan to help these hospitals have the medical equipment they need to serve their community. And that works. There's a lot of steps I'm missing here in between so that everything's properly documented and sending money out of the country. How do you provide proof and evidence of how it's spent, everything else. But at the end of the day, this is one piece out of many different pieces in somebody's estate planning that when their estate is large enough, it does make sense for them to have a micro profit, a micro foundation, or a full-fledged foundation or nonprofit of their own. Actually have their own. Really, nobody owns the nonprofit. There's a director that directs the nonprofit, and the underlying assets end up being spent in such a way that it benefits the community, somebody in need. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Good question. Good thoughts. Yeah, simplifying things I think is really a benefit of the deferred sales trust, right? And simplifying your estate plan. So the more clear on your vision and the outcome that you're trying to achieve, right? The more precise a plan can be put in place that achieves that. All right, good thoughts and questions. I'm going to open it up to for others. We have Carl. Hello, Carl. We have Maria. We have Moana. We have Pierce. Pierce, welcome, brother. Hope you're doing great. And feel free to unmute, say hello, and ask a question or a comment.
Hey guys, how are you?
Great, Pierce. How you doing, brother?
Good, man. Just soaking it all in again. So, no, I think you guys are having a pretty awesome discussion right now. I like the kind of the head to head of the charitable remainder and the estate planning aspect, DST 2.0. I think that's really awesome stuff. So yeah, it's just been here the alternative methods that people can use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Pierce is down. He's a commercial broker down there, and also is co-host of Tax Solutions podcast. So, curious, any temperature feel for the real estate or the market down in Newport? What are you seeing or feeling down there with just the overall thoughts on the markets?
Transactions are still down. Prices are kind of down a little bit in Orange County altogether. Newport, they are also down a little bit, but I think that has to do more with the amount of just, well, or the lack thereof inventory, which is, driving down everything. And so that's pretty rough on the luxury residential side. On the commercial side of things, it's really interesting. I was talking to another buddy of mine, and he was saying that transactions are down like 80%, and a lot of it has to do with the fact that people just can't get funding, and it's just a tight market right now, with the low flow happening, but they are definitely a lot more tight. It is good that the Fed paused the rates. That kind of just keeps the pressure consistent on the bank, stuff like that. Actions can actually go. But that's kind of a little pulse.
Yeah, very well said. And by the way, to that point, this is why we think the deferred sales trust is created for times like this, because there's kind of three buckets here, right? Pierce is talking about debt, or debt flow is a good way to think about it, right? How easily and accessible are transactions and debt flowing to close transactions from banks? Well, that flow is tightening up, right? We've seen that, right? Then there's also there's this cash flow, right? That's what most of us think about. Well, cash flow, what's going on with cash flow? Well, as debt restrictions tightened up, there's what's called loan to value ratios that are becoming lower and lower, meaning is not as much debt per property available. In other words, think about debt coverage ratios, right? So as the debt gets restricted, guess what happens to the cash flow? It tends to get restricted as well, because there's not as much, debt's more expensive. Interest rates have gone up. And then you have the third wheel, which is what we're really focused on here, is tax flow. I guess in the middle of all of this is what's called, timing, or time. Time is the one thing that's kind of consistent in all investments, and it's the most important aspect or foundation for any investment horizon. And you see what's going on, you go, okay, so my interest rate has gone up, my access to debt is down. Over there, interest rate on a property, those fixes are essentially, it's expired. It's like an insurance on an interest rate. You go, hey, I had a 3.5% interest rate. I bought a there. Well, those caps are expiring, and all of a sudden it went 3.5 fix. It's adjusting to 5.5, 6, 7%, depending on what what the index is that it's tied to, and your cash flow gets flipped upside down. And so now people have to sell. And so we're seeing, even in the multifamily marketplace, which is actually doing really well in the sense that we still have 4 to 5 million units that were short in the US, and the occupancies are really healthy, 97% plus in most of your markets, right? Great. The collection is really good. The rents are actually either a little bit up or just even. The expenses are all pretty solid. Insurance for some states like a Texas or Florida, even California with the fires, right? Some natural disasters definitely has gone up. Yes, there's been some increases in just labor costs, but they've gotten a little bit better in size. But overall, those are still manageable. In other words, reserves. We build in reserves and variance for those types of things. And rent growth has been so strong the last few years that these properties are actually healthy. But what's not healthy, or is when your debt essentially goes up by 50 or 60 or sometimes 100% increase in debt service. And so if you're over leveraged and the debt flow, meaning that the banks aren't willing to refinance. In fact, some of them are now saying, oh my gosh, you're below the debt coverage ratios based upon the covenants of the loans. These are commercial loans we're talking about here. Then it becomes a nightmare. And so for people who still have fully occupied, well-managed properties in good locations, they don't have a property problem or an NOI problem. They have a debt problem. The effects of the purchase is not only can you sell hopefully at a decent price, and that new buyer can get a debt that is more favorable for them, but now you can defer the tax, right? Because think if it was both sides of things. Just because your cash flow is tanked, right? Now the valuation obviously is probably going down as well, so you are losing some equity there. But if you've done multiple 1031 exchanges, your basis is still very low or at zero, right? And therefore the tax doesn't just go away because you didn't make money on that deal, unless you had bought it with a new basis, and then you made less. You don't have a capital gains tax there. So all these threes are constantly in play, and we're seeing it all happen. And we believe the deferred sales trust is amazing because not only do you have to worry about debt flow, in other words, you can sell, you do not have to replace that debt in the 1031 exchange. You do not have to take on the higher interest rate. And you don't have to buy that property right to you based upon your overall debt coverage ratio and all of the other. So in other words, accessing highly appreciated assets. So the 1031 forces you to go to equal or greater debt, forces you to buy something equal or greater value, which leads to the second part, is cash flow. A lot of these deals and all these sellers aren't necessarily taking a discount yet. In other words, they're holding on, right? And they might try to renegotiate with the banks, but they're holding on to these assets because they have a better deferred sales trust. They can sell, diversify, pay off debt, and then here's the biggest thing: back to the time piece. Bringing this all together, they can make time be their friend. Meaning they can wait 6, 12, 18 months. They can invest it in maybe some stocks that are down now. They can invest into T-bills, which are paying 4 to 5%. They can do some lending with multifamily that, we work with groups that are paying about 10%. And they can get liquid or semi or 30-day liquid type of capital that is prepared when the deal makes sense. I'm going to pause there, see what Pierce, any thoughts on that? And then we'll pass it to Jake, and Jake can maybe wrap it up unless someone else has any questions.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the biggest, best kept secrets, about the DST is that it gives you this ability to kind of sell. One of the problems I think that a lot of people are running into is that the sellers today are still trying to get yesterday's prices when the debt just makes things anymore. I mean, the properties aren't penciling, and so sellers have to come back to earth and get off of the the high that we just came off of, and it's hard to do. But if you can see, okay, well, I could sell it for 10% less or whatever than it was, but I can defer 40% of the tax and not have to go 1031 it, right? Now, you're kind of net positive 30%, as opposed to going back and buying a property at a 7.5% rate, where you're replacing the debt, you're replacing the value of the property. You can breathe, you can chill and just wait. And I think that, in the next few, I think a lot of people are kind of waiting for this idea that, the commercial space in 2008 and the commercial space, might connect 18 to 24 months. And it might, and if it does, you're going to be well positioned versus the guy who trying to get today's, reach the 1031. You're going to market, and then you find a property that probably doesn't make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
and so it's really so freeing.
You said it really well. Yeah, the flexibility of the deferred sales trust to eliminate the 1031 exchange. By the way, it also works for primary homes. So you have a luxury home in Newport Beach, you have a luxury home in La Jolla, you have a luxury York, selling a primary home, big home, you can use the deferred sales trust. It works for businesses. It works for cryptocurrency. It works for stock, public or private. It works for any highly appreciated asset. Here's the key: in the net proceeds, $1 million gain. That's the kind of to make it sense. Unless you have two assets at $500,000 each, and then it makes sense for that in a shorter period of time. So that being said, Jake Meller, do you want to add to any of the last few comments and any of the wisdom to share with us?
There's a couple of different things that help a lot in these types of scenarios. Whereas Pierce was mentioning, people are trying to sell it with their prices because oftentimes they're also figuring in the tax ramifications of their net that they're going to receive after taxes. It still might be a good time to sell, even though they can't get yesterday's prices with a financial tool such as the deferred sales trust, because what they end up bringing home or what they end up utilizing to reinvest net of attorney fees rather than net of taxes, oftentimes is still greater than their original calculation of after taxes. So the deferred sales trust opens up a whole slew of new opportunities when it comes to timing of when to have an asset. Time, because heaven forbid that the market continue to go further down. Even though it's gone down, you can't get yesterday's prices, it still might be a good time to get out, depending on where you live, where you're at, etc. As well as some of our conversation about the charitable remainder trust and the charitable unilateral trust and estate planning and the deferred sales trust 2.0, and some of the things that we're talking about, Brett, remind me of somebody we spoke to a couple months ago selling mortuaries. I don't remember if you recall the conversation. Simply, they had some financial and said, use all of your assets, lock them all up outside of your estate in a crat, and then of course you can only really at the very most benefit from possibly 30% of the actual sale of the mortuary. You recall that conversation where we liberated that way of thinking by allowing them, because they really did want to donate. but they were also concerned that the director of this foundation or the charity next year. They wanted to donate, but they didn't necessarily want to donate 100% of the mortuary. Well, with the deferred sales check, we were able to show them and open their eyes to how literally this financial tool gives them the power over time. And for tax purposes, they don't have to get rid of everything. If they still want to donate, they can, but they don't have to donate today. They might sell today, but in 2 or 3 years, when the new director comes into that foundation, they can have the power of choice and timing of whether or not that new director is taking that foundation in the same direction the old director was taking it, and if they should donate, and not 100%, but maybe 5 to 10%. While at the same time, they're reinvesting the underlying assets, diversifying, not having everything locked up in the mortuary, and building, in a way, their overall net worth. And so that's just another example of a conversation that we've had fairly recently, a few months ago, of somebody who, based on the information they had in the moment from their advisors, they were not happy with the solution. They were not happy locking everything up in a CRAT. But with this, they were able to still do the CRAT at a smaller percentage that made more sense, as well as accomplish a lot of the other goals and dreams that they had going on at the same time. Brett, what do you want to comment there?
No, I think that's great, Jake. It's always good to get live case studies and live deals because it brings to life what we're talking about in concept here. That being said, if you want to take action right now and start a deferred sales trust, or at least download our free ebook, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. We also have a brand new book that just came out. It's called Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. The Jake Miller, who just spoke a minute ago, has a chapter. I got a couple as well. We also have Kevin Harrington from Shark Tank. He's in the book as well. That's Building a Capital Gains Tax Exit Plan. You can learn and dig into the story behind the DST, how it came about, and kind of hear our journey step by step. So check that out. But Jake, if people want to find you, where can they find you, Jake Miller? And we'll do Jake Carpenter next.
Absolutely. So we have a website that's very similar to Brett, strategictaxsolutions.com. Again, that's strategictaxsolutions.com. There's a little booking tab. You can hit click and find a time on our calendar, an appointment. Should you have a transaction over $1 million and have capital gains over $1 million, we can definitely talk about your scenario and situation and find out what works best for you. In addition, we also have an 800 number, 1-800-773-1848. Look forward to talking soon.
Thanks, Jake. And Jake Carpenter, if you want to find you, where can they find you?
All right. You can call our offices at Carpenter Capital at 509-396-5292. Our website is www.carpentercapital.llc, which will be live here shortly. And thanks very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jake. And Pierce York, if you want to find you, where they can find you.
Yeah, you can reach out directly on my cell phone, 916-878-0903. I also put it in the chat. You can call or text me.
Excellent. Thank you, Pierce York. And Rebecca Munson, if people want to find you, they're going to be selling a house up in Tahoe. They want to defer all this tax and maybe Truckee or anywhere up there. Where can they find you?
They can call, text me on my cell, 530-448-9740.
Thank you, Rebecca. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for attending, listening, watching to this replay. We so appreciate everyone out there. Encourage you to take action with the information you just learned today, and join us too. You want to join us on this mastermind? You go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com as well to find out ways to join. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again next week. Bye, everybody.
Bye now. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Recording stopped.